to me, there was a real difference between what one experienced in the corporate sort of daytime world and then what one could feel like expression and be around people in nightclubs. And that was, again, unique for me. And I think the world has moved on from that. I think, what we see in media images and the corporate workforce has really changed. But I feel that was just starting in the underground world in the 90s.
So today's Thursday, February 23rd, 2023. Who are we speaking with?
Hey there, I'm Alice Arnold.
And this is Genji Siraisi.
So this episode is dedicated to the Giant Step retrospective happening at SOBs on March 5th at 6 p.m. So let's start talking about the organization that's putting this together, MoMA NYC, and then let's go into the whole retrospective. So who wants to take it from there?
Sure, I'll start off. So MoMA NYC is a nonprofit, fairly young and small nonprofit, and we are dedicated to celebrating and preserving New York City music diversity and specifically underground independent music communities through exhibit, education, and performance. And we're out here doing whatever we can to preserve the stories that are getting lost, making sure people understand the importance of community gatherings that are centered around music, that are not necessarily driven solely by profit motives, and that's kind of where I started with it. So,
perfect. And then tell us about the event. Oh, sorry, Alice.
Well, I'll just kind of add to that. I mean, there's such this in my talks with Genji always about MoMA. There's such this incredible history of New York City with music, from Broadway style music to Latin jazz sort of forming here and hip hop forming here. So I think MoMA is such a unique organization in that it's really curating so many of these different moments and sort of putting it into a cultural context.
We're trying. It's a big job. It's a big job for sure.
Perfect. And then tell us about the Giant Step event.
So the Giant Step event is it's going to be like I said, it's a retrospective. So we're having a panel discussion with Morris Bernstein, the CEO and co-founder, along with David Hershkovitz, who's the co-founder of Paper Magazine, who's very important in pop culture and coverage at that time specifically. And we're going to also have Erica Lee, who is essential in setting up all of the events. She was like sort of the right-hand woman, of the organization that really made those events run smoothly and was very, very instrumental. And she's doing also amazing work with like experiential programming these days, and she still produces a lot of stuff. And we're going to have also DJ Smash, who is going to both do a DJ set afterwards, but will also be on the panel. And he's coming in from San Francisco. He was the resident DJ there from 90 to 95. We're 94 maybe. I have to check that fact, but right in that main zone. He also was, as I mentioned, he was resident DJ at Nell's, but also at Save the Robots, which was one of those really well-known underground spots that we all know. I see everyone's nodding, so we all know, but there's definitely a lot of people who don't know. So that could be on our radar for another one of our club series. We're going to be also, hopefully we're doing on the Pyramid, I think next Pyramid Club, which has a very fascinating history. So we're going to hopefully kick off on time at 6 and have some light conversation about it. And then there's going to be an exhibit of Alice's fantastic photographs taken right from this period, which are, and the thing is just being so, it's like the end of the vinyl era and no one is walking around with cell phones. It's definitely a time. It's great to see there's not one, camera in any of the pictures, no cell phones, no cameras in any of the pictures, which is an amazing thing. And also speaks to how, how important and rare the images are too. So, and they're great pictures beyond that, just in themselves, a piece of art. So hopefully it'll be, we're very excited about it. Obviously I'm going to see a lot of old people. As I mentioned earlier, which I didn't say just now, is that I was also the house drummer in that same time period. So a very close connection with Smash and with Morris and the whole crew and Erica. And so it'll be great to see a lot of old faces and to relive some of that energy and that spirit.
Will the event be recorded for people who can't attend in person?
We're gonna try and document as well as possible, but it will unlikely be fully documented or it's live streamed. But I really, like anyone who's within, I know it's a long way to go if you're not, I mean, it could be a long way to go to come to New York, but if you're anywhere near, please, we encourage you to make it by.
Fantastic. So let's talk about Giant Step. How did each of you respectively become involved or connected to Giant Step?
I knew about, I guess, what later became called acid jazz, right, with the quotation marks. I guess from being in London or having friends from there. And I guess my music inspirations definitely come from blues and jazz and soul music. So the update on that, the people doing it in your generation, that was what became what was known as the acid jazz movement. And I saw, I guess, just the ads of what Groove Academy was doing, the live shows. That's the counterpart to the club, which was called Giant Step back then. And so I wanted to go and I wanted to photograph those clubs. So I just reached out and asked to be allowed to photograph it. So I started photographing the Groove Academy shows. And I think the first one I did was Blaze, right? A more house group. Yeah. And then they quickly did, like, George Clinton and Ohio Players. So I was right there photographing. And then when they started Giant Step, the first one, which was at SOB's, where the anniversary event is happening, I was there. And I just, wanted to keep photographing it because I had already started this project photographing nightlife culture. And this is like 91, I guess. I started photographing the Groove Academy in 1990, so this is 91. And then in 1993, I was able to connect with Paper Magazine and I became their nightlife photographer. So then I was starting to photograph at a lot of different places, all underground sort of clubs throughout the city.
Alice has so many great photos. And yeah, one of the things I'm looking forward to is seeing your their club book come out with all of the other, she has so much to put together in this scene. So it's gonna be great to see that. And I've been encouraging her all this time, pushing, saying, yes, we got to get this out. And yeah, and it's
Oh wait, tell us about this club book.
Oh, well, first let's answer your question.
Okay.
Genji,
Well,
how did
the
you
book is
get
coming up, yeah.
connected?
Okay, so
you were like playing live music with a lot of
I mean,
crew.
I got connected with this band, Repercussions, which was looking for a drummer, and it worked out great. Loved them. They were like, it was a new soul kind of a vibe, very sort of similar to, I guess, Brand New Heavies, a little more on sort of soul, I don't know, and maybe a little, I don't know, it's just a little different, but they were, a lot of them were going to Giant Step already, and this was 91, it must have been, and or maybe end of 90, and they brought me down there, and I immediately was sucked right in. I started playing as a house musician, along with, originally it was Richard Worth on flute and Gordon Nappy on timbales and emceeing. And there were some other musicians who'd come in and out sometimes, but the three of us made up the sort of the central core for those years. And also, so I was also, as we were playing there, upstairs, this was at Metropolis, just off Union Square, this was in the basement. And upstairs was kind of a fancy restaurant. It used to be a bank, so it had like marble floors and columns and all this stuff, but it was a great restaurant. And they had a jazz combo playing up there. And apparently, they guess they were always, watching all the hip, fine ladies going downstairs and wondering what's going on. So after they were done with their set, they, came down, and eventually we were asked to sit in, and that's how we really got some great players there. And those were the other half of Groove Collective. And so Richard, myself, and Nappy were the rhythm were in Groove Collective. And then we had from upstairs, we had Jay Rodriguez, Bill Ware, saxophone and vibes, Roseman on trombone, and Fabio Mogero on trumpet. And Ital Shore was also part of the original crew downstairs, and as was Jonathan Marin, was the bass player, was in Repercussions. Ital Shore is a keyboard player who probably most famously co-wrote the song Smooth, and as soon as that happened, his life changed course, because that was such an amazing, that record, just basically set him on a crazy trajectory. And we lost him as a keyboard player, of course, but that was a few years later. So anyway, yeah, my connection with, so the core of us, we made up, like I said, we made up a groove collective, the overlapping 3 of us with repercussions and 3 of us also with the Giant Step house band. And we also backed up Dana Bryant, who was the poet that they were promoting, Giant Step was promoting. And we did a lot of gigs with her. We ended up touring around we went to Japan, we went to Italy, we went to a bunch of other places. As you know, as the Giant Step crew, and a lot of times we had Dana with us. She was doing she was amazing, just a great presence, and one of her tracks was doing a revised version of Gil Scott-Heron's "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised," which she adapted the lyrics a little. So yeah, so it was an amazing time of a lot of playing at that time, where, like I said, I was playing in 3 or 4 different kind of combinations, and a lot of times we were of these different various bands were opening for people like the Ohio Players. We played at Bryant Park, opening for the Ohio Players. We played with Gap Band. We played with so we were on a ton of these shows. Also, just loving being there and soaking it up. So it was a really important time for me. And I'll just say one more thing. Sorry, I don't get long-winded with this, but playing with Jazzy Nice and Smash at Giant Step was like that was my course on my life lesson in playing drums with the dance music, and really getting the feel for how to adapt to live playing with records and tracks.
I mean, to me, that was always a huge attraction with Giant Step, that not too many other clubs did, to have live music intermixed with vinyl. I mean, just the cultural surfing that you could do with that, and the riffing. So that was that sort of jazz element in terms of improvisation that would occur at Giant Step was really a creative high.
Yeah.
Talk to us about the macro environment of New York at that time. What was happening in terms of nightlife and clubs?
Yeah.
I feel I have a very strong positive sense of that time, because the underground clubs to me were mixed socially, racially, ethnically, with gender identity. And something I write about when Genji mentioned I'm trying to make a club book, part of my essay in writing that was talking about like that above ground. Yeah, no, the above ground world, the corporate world, like wasn't at all like that. And you could be at night, and you could have a culture and a society that didn't have these strictures, and was freer, and a lot of different types of people could mix, and there wasn't I don't mean to paint it as some, hippy dippy utopia, but to me, there was a real difference between what one experienced in the corporate sort of daytime world, and then what one could feel like expression and be around people in nightclubs. And that was, again, unique for me. And I think the world has moved on from that. I think, what we see in media images and the corporate workforce has really changed. But I feel that was just starting in the underground world in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what happens, and of course we paint by decades, which is not, it doesn't obviously fit, everything overlaps to certain degrees. But I think when we look at the 80s and what was happening then, we had that go-go, Wall Street mentality of like everything, and that whole thing kind of really set up that corporate world that was a very different kind of bubble from. And I think the reaction to that was a lot of this going back to, I mean, maybe not hippy dippy, but we're going to get more relaxed. We have our own scene, and we want to be separate from that. And a lot of the club scene also, I mean, remember the 80s, we went through AIDS and crack, and really took a lot of creative people out, and a lot of people, a lot of the underground independent scene was being very affected by that. And so that really had a large effect on, I think it meant the scenes had to sort of come together and be a little bit more convergent like that, because they were, house music and that whole scene was really coming out of the disco era. It was growing and growing and growing, and then this terrible epidemic hit, and it just changed how everybody had to see that world and that lifestyle. And I think it made everyone kind of it really shook things up a lot. And also in the hip hop world, you had gone from the sort of early innocence of hip hop, and then it was blowing up, and in the 80s was heavily exploited. You know, it was coming out in every McDonald's commercial and being, and being sort of and there was, I think, a reaction to that as well, and along with the sort of the gangster, really kind of hardcore vibe, that was a lot of clubs were stopped holding hip hop events because they didn't want that the violence and things were breaking out, and so there was again the need for the people who really wanted to be, conscious and socially conscious and carrying on this based on the music and the community, needed to find new ways to do that. And I think that's kind of a lot of what was happening. You're seeing people coming together and saying, there's something really valuable here. And it's not about setting up boundaries. It's not about trying to just sell it for the highest price. It's something that we have as people together, that we can all experience as meaningful. And, so, I mean, the 90s were really, also, ultimately, we look back, I think, I can see how it was set up, looking back at what the 90s really were. I mean, of course, eventually we get Giuliani and the no dancing rule, the enforcement of the cabaret law, and really cracking down on the smaller venues, that aren't licensed in a certain way,
Well, the other thing I would add, which sort of a lot of my work now, I do a lot of work about cities and urban culture and visual environments and within the urban environment. The 90s was, as Genji mentioned, the 80s, I wasn't here then. I came to New York in 1990 after university. And I guess a lot of there was still it was scary to walk down some streets for sure. And I lived in Lower East Side, East Village area, and I would often walk home feeling quite scared, that something might happen. But slowly that goes away, and the city begins, I guess, a little more income comes in, and the city becomes safer. But at the same time, rents were going up when we spoke about gentrification from the mid-90s on, but there was still ability to get a cheap apartment, relatively cheap apartment, and to live near places where you wanted to hang out. And so, and I think also in terms of opening up clubs or bars, you could get spaces, they weren't that expensive. So after, 1999 to 2001, the city starts getting very expensive in terms of the residential rents and, retail storefront rents. There's a little dip right after, 9/11, but then the city really roars back, and a lot of skyscrapers are developed, and the city becomes like this luxury city. And so the nature of, going out changes, and who's in those areas to go out, and the scene sort of dissipates and goes more towards Brooklyn. So I think in the 90s, you still had this ability of cheaper spaces, which allowed for creativity to happen. You could have some space and do things.
Absolutely.
You remember on Avenue A and 2nd or 3rd Street, there was that old gas station, and that was the nascent sort of sound lab, with the anarchy sign.
I think it was B. I think it was B.
Yeah, on B, right, on B. And then Robots was just a couple on the other side of the road, like a block down or something, right?
It's crazy. I've seen some video from the old gas station. I've been there. I played there once. I was back in. I started out playing punk bands, but I don't know if I mentioned that. But I started out playing the, CBs and Maxes back when I was a teenager. But yeah, it's amazing to see how much it's changed. I mean, I think part of that too is there's definitely nostalgia for what was, but then it's and that how that balances again with violence and crime and garbage and things that we all wish there was less of. But some people, they just see that and they're like, oh, that was terrible. But you were there, there was a lot to remember. It was good too.
Let's get into the photographs.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's start doing that.
Okay. Let me get my screen share going.
Absolutely.
This photo, and the screen share is working?
Yep, perfect.
So this is the first club I photographed in New York City, and I'd recently just moved to the city, and I was asked by a very small English magazine, Soul Underground, to go down there and photograph at Sound Factory. I had not heard of the club, which I know is sounds silly because it was such a big famous club for house heads, but I wasn't really a house head. I think it was probably the first house club I had really been to, and I just fell in love with what was going on, and I left that experience of photographing there thinking, this is a project I want to do. I want to photograph nightlife culture. And I was, very interested in youth culture, Dick Hebridge, cultural theory. And so I had already had ideas about projects I wanted to do. And I found this so interesting. And the dancing really influenced me, and to photograph the dancing, because it was all about rhythm, which of course is, from the music. But to photograph it, and it was very hard to photograph at night in these clubs. They're very dark spaces. You can't see that well to focus. There's not a lot of light to get a image that, will record well onto film. And the challenge of all that was interesting to me. But this idea of this rhythm and the movement, and how do you compose within your frame to make a very interesting, composition showing that sense of movement and being able to represent what this felt like to be in that space. So go ahead.
I was going to say Repercussions. I just saw on a flyer. I'd actually forgotten about it, but Repercussions, the band I was playing with, we did a record release of something we played at Sound Factory, I think with Louis Vega. And also seeing the pictures of this, I was just at the 53rd anniversary of the Loft party just a couple of nights ago. And of course they still have the signs up, no photographing on the dance floor. And of course, which is, one of those things that they've always done, but I always wanted to take pictures, but I'm like, but it's it's great to see people dancing, and it just reminding me of being there.
Yeah. I mean, this is the Junior Vasquez night, and it wasn't easy to go. You couldn't just photograph. You couldn't walk in and photograph. You couldn't just take pictures like today with people, their cell phones, they're always taking pictures. You couldn't do that. These were really underground spaces, and people didn't want their photo taken necessarily.
How did you gain access?
Intrusive too, right? That's the other thing. If you use a flash, right, it becomes a whole nother.
Yeah, I was using a flash.
It changes how people react. Obviously, you have to be but you did such a great job of that.
How did you gain access?
Well, I always, like here at Sound Factory, it was through the magazine. They made the calls and got me access, and then you go up to the the door people, the lines, who they let in, who they don't let in, and you just get access. And then the security guards, I'm introduced to the security guards, and they kind of they tended to look out for me and let people know this person's allowed. And if anybody, no one usually gave me problems. I mean, occasionally there were people didn't want their photograph taken, or people asked, "What are you doing?" And but generally it was okay. I guess they figured if you were allowed, and obviously they knew you were there with your flash, you weren't hiding it, right. So you were sanctioned, exactly. You were okay. But from that first club shoot, then I started my association with Giant Step and Groove Academy, because they were putting on live shows. They started, I think, with the live shows that were called Groove Academy. And I loved what they were doing with the live shows. This is, music that was dear to me. And so I asked them if I could photograph, and they just said, sure, and I would come down, and a lot of those shows started at SOBs, where the anniversary show next week, March 5th, is going to happen. And I would get right up in the front and be there early and photograph. And, I have a history of the photographers and photographs that I was influenced by, and there's a lot of them, but there's also a few well-known, like jazz and music photographers. And those pictures by Francis Wolff and others were very much in my head, those classic jazz photos, the person framed with the spotlight. And I was really thinking of those images as I was shooting. That would have been more the live music. And so they just had meaning to me. It wasn't commercial. There was no, income. It was just something that had meaning to me and I wanted to do. So when the Groove Academy, Morris and Jonathan, started doing the club night, that was Giant Step. And so this is a very early Giant Step picture. This is October 91. And here you see this meshing of live music, the DJ, that's Jazzy Nice, and Master Ace, a rapper. And that was really so much of what was unique and interesting at Giant Step. This is the Club Metropolis that Genji talked about earlier. There was underground, a rather nice restaurant that did have jazz musicians there. And so it was this real mixture of people.
Fantastic.
So I photographed Giant Step a lot, and I kind of like their photographer for a few years. And this is now a couple of years later, 1993. And I think this photo just captures the spirit of Giant Step, just who the people are and just having this great time. And there was a DJ playing with musicians and other photos on this roll. Nappy's playing on timbales and Ital's there and all of that. Genji, what do you remember?
Oh, amazing. Yeah, just really, I mean, it always felt a little bit like almost like anything could happen in a good way. You know what I mean? Like it was sort of musical experimentation. It was really completely improvised. I mean, I don't know how much the DJs really picked out their sets, the night before or whatever. I mean, they were definitely favorites that they would play, repeatedly through the years. But it was great is that you just came in, with yourself and your thoughts and your vibes for that day, and a lot of people were like, this is what you live for the week for, to get to, I mean, some other people went to like 4 or 5 parties a week, but like for me and a lot of people, it was just like, yeah, this is, I'm waiting for this. Have a Thursday night, I'm there. I had great memories. I think, I produced a track and I was hoping, I'd get Morris interested in it. And he was like, okay. And the only way I had it was to have a 2-track reel to reel. I had to bring it in and plug it into the DJ system and played it. And he liked it enough. We put it out on Eightball Records, which it was a big thing for me. So, but
and Eightball being known as a house label, also there's that mixing of house and what was called.
And I didn't know, but Smash co-founded. I didn't know that, but I just saw Smash co-founded Eightball, which I never knew.
Smash co-founded Eightball, yeah. With
There's
Alex.
a lot about Smash that I'm learning now that I didn't know at the time, which is pretty crazy. So.
Yeah. But from these associations with a few small magazines, and I was working as a photo assistant in New York when I first arrived for a couple of years before I could, start to make enough money to pay my rent with just my own jobs. So I was out a lot, photographing, and then I got connected to Paper Magazine. And that was really the entree to all of these clubs. If you said you were photographing for Paper, they let you in, and then you said that to people in the clubs, if they were, wanted to know what you were doing. Generally, people were like, oh, Paper, they had such a cool cred about them. And I had a really nice association, a very long run with Paper from like 93 to 2000. I was doing this nightlife column and also photographing DJ portraits for them and some other things. But I had a lot of creative freedom. And they would want, it started out like 1 photo a month, and then it became like 2 or 3 photos a month. So I would just go out and shoot like a roll per club, 36 images, and then make a few prints, 4 to 5 prints, and deliver them to Paper, and they would select what they wanted to use.
Now, given the nightclubs were often very dark, if not pitch black, how did you know if you got the shot?
Well, that's a very interesting question when you think about it from today's perspective, when people are, taking a photo with a screen and you see it, and then you can also play it back.
Exactly.
And, I guess it's just a different mentality. You don't need to check it because you really understand your exposure and you really know if you're in focus or not. And sometimes you're just hoping you got it, you were in focus. But in terms of composition, you develop enough of the visual memory, I think, to know that you got it.
I love the energy of this photograph.
Yeah, it's great.
I love the layering, like
the hair,
the image on the left of she's super focused and concentrated.
Right, the hand on the chest, right, and then the hands out.
Exactly, she's testifying. The brother's down looking at stage.
Picking up on the pager on the white pants.
Exactly, the pager. Wow, Motorola 2-way pager, throwback.
Yeah. Those show up in the photos quite a bit.
Oh, that's great.
Cell phones.
What you were saying about the photography is also very similar with recording now, because back in the day, you'd have to record on analog tape, and it would be like if it was distorted, over recorded, you could ruin it, or if it was too low, it'd be covered with hiss and noise, and you just had to roll it down all the way. And it's changed so much with digital. It's like everything is little pieces and samples and loops, and cutting things up, and there's so many ways to manipulate it. So yeah,
there's different expertise, I guess. And it's not that you don't have a lot of expertise when you're working digitally today, but
Different.
I guess you just had, like you had all these other options, and so you can always check if something was done right or you have it down. But then on the back end, you have so much more post-production work. And I think we didn't maybe think about as much post-production work. But you had to like really be solid when you're out there in production. You had to get it, you know.
Well, also you spend your time focusing on the images, right, and the people, as opposed to looking, I mean, on what you're capturing, as opposed to what I mean, in other words, when you're using analog, it's all about what's happening right in front of you. You're not being distracted by, well, let me look at my screen now, which is, of course, what we all do all day long.
You know, that's another really good point. When you're with this, like in this case, 35 millimeter photography, you know, the viewfinder is at your eye, right? You have the monocular vision and you are just looking here. And today, when people take photos, and they're often taking them like that, which I always think they'd be like that, but it's diffuse. The screen itself is diffuse, and you're looking kind of here and you're looking out, and you don't concentrate as well.
Yeah, it's a different thing for sure.
Yeah.
Wait, I'm also seeing another one, a cigarette. She's holding a cigarette.
She has a cigarette. She has a beer bottle.
Yeah.
And, I mean, their hairstyles and the fashion was great. And that was, I definitely saw that would attract me to, try to photograph those people. All right. And I was very interested in collections of people and how they're using space and how like the figure and the ground, and creating a very complex sort of interwoven figure ground feeling of different people and where they are and how they relate to each other with their body movements, their own rhythm within the compositional frame.
I love the kinetic energy.
Yeah.
Ooh, jungle. Wow.
Well, I was also very interested in the jungle scene, and there's a connection to Giant Step with that, because Mac, who is the door person, and a door person is a powerful position in the club world. There are gatekeepers.
Explain to people what a door person is.
Well, I'll Genji, I'll let you take that one.
Well, I'll try. I mean, so yeah, I mean, the door person, I mean, I think it's a tradition that goes way back, but the person who's holding the velvet rope, who is deciding whether you're coming in or not, based on whether you are dressed right, the right person, know somebody on the list, wrong shoes, with a date, all these different criteria that may be going through their head. Maybe they'll tell you, maybe they won't, but you're not getting in unless you get past the door person. And Mac was the best, because everyone loved Mac, and he was such a great, as far as door people go, he was much warmer and friendlier than many that I had met, through my experience. And he's very good at his job. Yeah.
Yeah. So Mac, working at Giant Step and Blue Note, or other places, started this club, Concrete Jungle. So I knew about Concrete Jungle through Mac, and he just wanted to do something with jungle. There wasn't. I don't think there was a jungle club yet in New York, but he knew a jungle coming out of England, and found it interesting. And there were some, I guess, DJs and people around Soul Slinger and DB, doing that music, which kind of comes out of techno. So Mac started this club, and I was, there at the very first one to photograph it. Not this one. It was in '94 at a small little space called, I think, 205 Club. And there was a lot of good parties there. Anyways, but I found it interesting again, like that there were
205 Christians, right?
DJs and rappers, or sometimes live music, and great dancing. Genji, you were saying something?
205 Christie, I think it was, right? Is that the one?
Yeah, 205 Christie. Yeah. A lot of good things happened at that little spice. So I'd since met the man here in the sweatshirt with his head back, and he and his cousin were martial artists. Muay Thai, or I'm probably not pronouncing it right, but he's from England, from I think Manchester, and he was here on like a circuit of doing martial arts, and he was brought here by his friends. And he just had a great time, and it was really neat talking to him about this night. And the man next to him in the Hilfiger cap was a model, was a Tommy Hilfiger model at that time. And I've met a few of the other people there. And here you do see a photographer coming up. There's someone else photographing. Right?
Camera.
Yeah.
I just want to add a quick plug for Alice. Also, just recently put out a small photo book on Goldie's visit here. I was doing the jungle and drum and bass scene. at now I'm drawing a blank on it, but I have the book right here. Alice, what maybe you should
Thank you. Well, yeah. So I would love to publish a really like big, conference and photo book, but so far I published a very small photo book from Cafe Royal Books in England. And it's on this Goldie concert that took place at the Mark Ballroom, which is now an NYU dorm, in 1995. And I just gave a talk about it the other night. And it's just one of these seminal sort of evenings where, Goldie, who had this great album, Timeless, came and played after a Bjork show, and all sorts of people were there. But again, really underground. You had to sort of know about it. But this really magical night that people still remember and talk about. Yeah.
Well, was he dating? I think he was dating Bjork at that time, wasn't he?
He was dating Bjork at the time, yeah. And she had her big show at Madison Square Garden, and then this was the after party,
Right. And Lady Miss Kier was there too from Delight.
Lady Miss Kier was there, yeah. A lot of people were there, yeah. This was another jungle club. I think this was DB's club, Ninja Tune. So again, that's some, people playing live music and doing, hanging out.
Ink is starting to show up on people a little more.
Yeah. Another club I was very associated with for many years was Sound Lab, and that's what this picture is from. I think they started in 96. This was DJ Spooky from 97, who we were talking earlier about the gas station on Avenue B, right? So Spooky was a big part of that scene, and the Sound Lab experimental electronic music comes out of that scene, but experimental electronic music that you could also dance to. So these were really fun parties that took place in oddball spaces like a martial arts studio or space in Wall Street or somewhere in Dumbo. And here again, we see somebody recording and different things going on.
So it's Avenue D. Do you remember where it was? Do you remember which?
I don't totally remember the cross streets, but this was somebody's apartment.
Right. Yeah.
And they just gave it over to have this club big party, like a house party. But like Sound Lab, like they brought in a lot of gear. There was always like just a lot of electronic gear and really experimental things going on. So it was a big setup to put these parties on. And they often were very interested in including visuals. So there was a lot of visual stuff going on too. His t-shirt is interesting because this is some Soul Slingers old label, A Liquid Sky, and the graphics are neat. It's a tape cassette, but not just the 2 reels. We got the 3 reels now because there's a lot extra sounds and music going on.
I love it.
Tape Revolution.
Tape Revolution.
Yeah.
Great detail. Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, how about these two guys in the back there? Wait, let's go back in again for 1 second. Did you see these two guys like having the exchange? It was like, I don't know what's going on exactly.
I know what's going on. This is Howard, who was the co-founder of Sound Lab, and some other guy. And I like, yeah, something's going on with the sound, or something has to be fixed. The people running the club, right? They don't get to just have fun. They're in a constant state of, like putting out fires or problems, That is something that is significant. This is Sound Lab, also another Sound Lab. But I don't know, Genji, you might have the better date, but I think around 96, the club scene changed a lot in New York City because at that time, the mayor Giuliani, who's, in the news now as a Trumpite, right? Rudy Giuliani and all that legal crazy stuff that he's been involved with trying to keep Trump in as president. But Giuliani was mayor of New York. And he was on a little mission to shut down and nightlife to get the city to feel like cleaner. And
You messed it up.
So I'll just say one. So that really changed the experience of going to these clubs. And you couldn't. His main, what he put through as a policy, Genji will say more about it, but was this: you could not dance inside a space, retail space, a bar or club, if you did not have a cabaret license. And it was not easy to get a cabaret license. They're expensive, very difficult. They only allowed a few. And the big clubs would have the cabaret license, but these little spaces like the 205 Christie, where the Jungle Stuff was taking place, or, these other spaces at Sound Lab, it just killed that scene. Genji.
I just want to add two things. One is that I just learned also that David Hershkovitz, founder of Paper Magazine, ran against Rudy Giuliani,
Yeah,
which
as
I'd
mayor.
never known about until just when I
Yeah.
started bio. Yeah, but the cabaret law, for people who don't know, goes way back to, I don't know if it's either pre-prohibition or right around that time, but it really was used by, the powers that be to shut down places that they didn't want. They didn't like people, interracial mixing, or they didn't like too much jazz music, or people getting, whatever, having too much fun. And specifically also used against very popular jazz musicians who were, if you didn't have a cabaret license, you couldn't play in a club. So every musician had to have a cabaret license. And that was the way they actually stopped people. They would bust them for smoking a joint, and you wouldn't be able to work for however long they decided, whatever it was. So it was really, and only, enforced spottily throughout its lifetime, for different bad reasons. And Giuliani decided to resurrect this ancient law and start enforcing it, which really just hurt so many small businesses. I mean, it really, because if you can afford to, get into the community board and pay for all the things you need to do to get the licenses and everything, and you're a big venue, you manage to figure it out pretty easily. But if you are a small business, a mid-sized place, those things could really, and if they shut you down for a night, I mean, could ruin your business. So yeah, it was a really bad time for people. And I know a lot of people who were, firsthand stories of people being busted for smoking a joint or drinking a beer, outside and being thrown into a van with no lights on, handcuffed, with a bunch of other people that they were collecting. So you don't even know who you're in there with, and sit there for hours while they keep filling the van up and then taking you down to the, to the booking. You spend the night there in the tombs. So it was not a fun thing especially for people who were basically not really doing anything wrong. To be treated like that is terrible. So.
Yeah, for sure.
But also I can see it actually, in this case, I can see that it in some ways pushed nightlife underground, which is another thing that needs to happen. I feel like a lot of the great music that's come out of New York, but all around, is it comes from people getting together and doing their thing, regardless of what other, like I said, it's not a commercial venture, it's not a legal venture necessarily. It's about the music and the community of people getting together as the first part of it. So yeah.
Tell us
Yeah,
about
I
this
mean, I think
photo.
if you want to foster creative scenes, and you're young person, like college age, and you want to do things, and you need to meet people, right? And you want to, you have to make collaborations. You need space, right? And you need to try to find audiences, and that's what's tough in the city today. That space is so expensive.
Right. Well, the other thing is that back then you had to go to a space to hear new music, to meet face with people, socially. Like we didn't, without social media, without all these connections that we have now. I mean, that was really the only way you could really have that interaction. So, yeah. Well, I mean, so people are connected in different ways, which obviously has a lot of positive things as too. But definitely personal interaction is key. If you want to dance.
Yeah, I mean, you said something earlier, Genji, like, Thursday night, you knew that was the night you can go down the Giant Step and you're going to run into people, and you'll make friends there. And so there was that sense of certain clubs that were longer standing clubs at certain nights, and you put them in your calendar and you look forward to it. Yeah. This photo is from one of these really underground spaces, Robots, which I don't even think would open until like 1 a.m. or something like that. And DJ Smash, who's flying in from San Fran to hold down the decks at the March 5th Giant Step event, played a lot at Robots. And there was a lot of crazy stuff went down.
Everyone has a crazy story about Robots, for sure. Yeah.
The other crazy robot story, Genji?
Well, no, maybe I'm one of the only people who know, but I probably because I just can't remember what happened when I was there. But I can't have a specific crazy story, but I know that, yeah, it was crazy. I do know that.
How about you, Alice? Do you have a crazy story photographing an event or a party?
It was always interesting, but I, as someone who was photographing, I needed to stay sharp, or at least that's my aesthetic, sharpness, focus. And I needed to be a good observer to make the images I wanted to. So, I wasn't drinking no drugs. And of course, I'm around people who, maybe are have an altered consciousness, but I was very sober and sharp. So I wouldn't say that my experiences were crazy, but what you saw, of course, was often interesting. Like in this photo, there's somebody, dancing on the bar in a very interesting way, and just being an entertainer or performer.
Well, I can tell you a little bit about, some of the experiences playing at Giant Step. I mean, the big thing was, you'd be playing drums when the DJ's kicking and everyone's dancing. And then all of a sudden you realize like, oh, wow, that's Grandmaster Kaz coming up here to rap, like somebody who's like, and then the next thing you know, so like Steve Teray, who I didn't know at the time, he was playing his conch shell, like, he was a great trombone player. And, he was, elderly, middle-aged gentleman, I guess, at that time. And, maybe even beyond middle age, but I didn't really know who he was. He sounded great. But then I later realized, looking at some of the black and white footage of Miles Davis playing So What, the very famous television footage of that, Steve Teray's there in the back smoking a cigarette with all the other guys hanging out, like, he's part of the band, and just like, wow, I played with that guy, and it was one of those things where you just feeling the energy of different people, and sometimes the stage would get packed with people. Everyone wanted to jump on the mic as soon as when it got really hot. You had a lot of MCs, and everyone wanted to get up there. Literally like having people like throwing people off the stage, saying like, that's it. So there was a lot of. It was great to have that kind of energy where you just felt like, anything could happen. Everyone wanted to be part of it, and everyone was like there for the joy of it. It was amazing.
That's how I would say also. Like there was just a lot of creative energy, and it was nice to be part of that, to be around that. It was inspiring, yeah.
I love this one too.
Tell us about this photograph.
This photograph is from Jackie 60s, which is another very long-standing club in New York, and with a unique sort of aesthetic. And they did a lot of theme parties, and so this theme party, I think, is the Puerto Rico day, and so they had guys come up on stage, kind of stripping down, and someone again is filming, becomes a media event. So I was at Jackie 60s numerous times to photograph, and just really creative sets, sort of in terms of the visuals of the environment, and great music with Johnny Dynell and other DJs, probably more house music, and just it I guess like almost like there's a curation of people involved, right, who would go there, and this again very creative, interesting experiences.
Looks like they're carrying on the tradition of
photograph. Sorry,
I'm saying like they're really carrying on the tradition of like Mud Club and Pyramid and these places that were doing a lot of that
Cabaret.
Yeah,
and Johnny Donnell, I think, used to work at Mud Club, and his partners. It wasn't just him; he had partners, Chi and Kitty Boots, and other people involved. So they put on a big show, which is a lot of work. So I have lots of great photos from Jackie 60s.
Cool.
Shelter. Wow.
Yeah. So now we're at 1999. We've gone through, a decade almost. And Shelter was in a space that was a long running space of several different clubs over many, many years. And I think it had recently maybe reopened at this point. And I'm shooting color now. The paper had asked me to start filming in color maybe around 97 or something. So I was started shooting color for them in the clubs, and I have so many great images from this night. And again, I would just take one roll of film, but like the Shelter just was incredible. The sound system, the DJs, the dancers, people just really dedicated and knowledgeable, about music and dancing and stylish.
And this was at Vinyl or 39th Street?
Vinyl.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I mean, I've been to Vinyl like, 94, 96, there's 99, but different iterations of people putting on different things there in these club spaces. So this would have been a big club, and this would have been a space that had a cabaret license. you know,
Yeah.
so they would not have been shut down like the smaller places like a Robots or a 205. Yeah. And just an awesome sound system, you know, and they had lights, you know, great lights and all of that. Yeah. Yeah. And there's another couple more photos. This is
SOBs again.
SOVs again, but Basement Bhangra, which was, you know, like we started to get a lot of splinter types of music in the 90s, you know, so the traditional sort of Bhangra Indian music or from the Indian subcontinent sort of getting in on the DJ culture and more mixing electronica. And it was like this big scene. I mean, I'm sure that it's still a scene, but it was a big scene by DJ Rekka putting this on in the later
Well, apparently
90s.
they still have a Bhangra night going on at SOBs. I think it's on Saturday nights usually now.
Wow.
But yeah,
Wow.
it's one of their mainstays still. You know,
Yeah.
when
And
SOBs,
Rekka just did a big event at the Central Park where they put on a music every summer. And so she had a big Bhangra thing. So that's interesting too, the globalization that starts to happen in the 90s with music and you know, when the internet is, you know, kind of taking off around the mid 90s, but you know, these connections are starting to happen as people can get more connected around the globe.
Oh, this is
Alex
great.
us back to 93. This was and I just can put these next to each other because of the different styles of dancing and comparing them across cultures, you know. But this is a hip hop club in the Bronx that I was sent to photograph by Vibe magazine, and Vibe magazine was just getting started in 93. And I went up there, and I mean, just again, a great experience just around these, you know, young kids. And you know, you're telling you from Vibe, did they even know Vibe? Because it was so new at that point. It hadn't even been published, I think, the first edition when I went there. But they were friendly and nice, you know.
Cool.
As most people, my experience is most people were, you know, but I mean, I worked to make that happen. I wasn't trying to photograph people who didn't want to be photographed and to make anybody look bad or, you know, do anything paparazzi style. I think this is the last photo in the deck here. Yeah. Underground Party, Royal Flush. I think this was Stretch Armstrong's party.
Oh, yeah.
And had a hip hop vibe to it, but a lot of, you know, lot of different types of music and just the kind of cool, fashionable crowd. So you can see people dressing up here. And yeah, this was in a Chinese restaurant on either Center or Lafayette Street on the edge of Soho, near Grand Street. Yeah.
Downtown.
Yeah, downtown. Yeah.
These are great.
I'll stop screen share now. We'll go back to our bigger Zoom.
Great photo, guys.
Yeah.
No, fantastic photographs. Thank you so much for sharing. We actually ended up covering a lot during those. We talked about Giuliani, we talked about Nightlife, we talked about Cabaret. Those are all the questions that I was going to go into. So I think we pretty much have it covered. Is there anything else that you want to talk about in terms of the event or Giant Step in general before we shut down?
Well, just you know, just that I'm really glad we were able to pull this together. I've been trying to do it for a while because, like I said, my connection seemed like this was an easy lift, but of course, things never work out exactly as planned. But yeah, we're gonna. There's a lot of people who I wish could have flown in for this because there are a lot of people who are, you know, have spread across the globe, but we'll have a great turnout. And yeah, I'm super excited. I'm really glad that Alice has allowed us to show her photos as well and be part of this.
No, thank you so much. Alice, do you want to say anything else before we close?
There's so much one could say about images and nightlife culture and photography, but I'm just kind of like jazzed that people are interested in these photos. And I've been giving more talks and showing things, and you know, Genji and I always talk about, you know, putting on, you know, sort of interactive or immersive you know, experiences to create some with images and music. So I'm really looking forward to the March 5th event because it's, you know, we can do that, you know, and we can go back in history a little bit and go forward as well, right?
Love it. Well, for everyone that's watching, so it's Sunday, March 5th, doors at 6. This talk starts at 6:30. The photo exhibition's at 8. The DJing is at 8:30. Is that correct?
Something about that. Yeah, hopefully we'll stay on schedule. Yes.
This is awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I'll see you in New York on the 5th.
Cool.
Noah, thank you.
All
Great
right.
to
Thank
see
you so much. Have a great day. I appreciate you both.
Of course. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.